is, Leann, if you did feel betrayed by David's addiction, how did you deal with the forgiveness, unforgiveness aspect of his attraction/addiction? I actually don't think that I ever felt betrayed by David. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes I forget.
I was always surprised that you never felt betrayed.
Sometimes I forget my process, so I have to ask David to remind me. I don't think I ever felt betrayed because David is, he's a really different individual. He's incredible. David had so much remorse, and he had so much brokenheartedness over what he was struggling with and over what was happening. So I would say that immediately kind of took betrayal out of the equation for me. If David said, I am really struggling with same-sex attraction, but I don't think that it's bad. I think that I'm just bisexual and you need to be okay with that. That's a whole nother story. And that's a whole other ballgame because I'm not a man, so I could never provide that, which means he's looking for something other than me, which means he's operating outside of our covenant of marriage, and that is betrayal. But when David came to me with his struggle, he named it as a struggle, said this is not something that I want, and he felt so much shame. And not that I'm like, I'm really glad he felt shame. No, we don't want people to feel shame. Never from Jesus. Side note, shame's never from God. Just, that's a freebie. So
you should write that down.
If you're feeling shame, it is not Jesus. So David felt, but he did feel a lot of shame and he felt a lot of guilt. And that was just what was birthing out or coming out because of his remorse and because of his regret and also because of the brokenness where he didn't feel there was anything else he could do. So he felt so stressed and pressed and confused. And when you get like that, you're like, I'm gonna explode. I gotta go do something. And that's when we do quote unquote crazy behavior, or we abuse substances, or we give ourselves away to people, or whatever your vice is. That's what we do because we're trying to come down to feel comfortable. We're trying to come down to feel okay. We're trying to find peace in any way we can, and we can't because we don't know what to do. So David felt so much remorse, and then he came to me and he was honest with me. What was really hard for us is when David took months to be honest. And so when he would come to me and say, Leann, I am so sorry. And he's, usually crying and kind of shaking because he's angry and so sad all at the same time. I'm really sorry I looked at porn again. And okay, when did you do this? 3 months ago. 3 months ago? You've been living with this. You've been sleeping next to me with this for 3 months. So my first thought was, well, that really pisses me off. My second thought was, that must have really sucked for you to have felt that burden and that weight of shame by yourself for 3 months. To sleep next to me, because we were married, and be thinking about that and have it eating him alive, that must have really sucked for you. So thinking about all that he went through in that time, why would I heap more shame onto him? And why would I heap more shame and guilt onto him when really what he wants is freedom because he's confessing to me? We confess because we want something different. We confess because we want freedom. And we don't know how to get there. We don't know how to find that. So David wanting freedom, David wanting to be honest with me, David working so hard to be honest with me, even though it took him 3 months, he was still fighting and battling through those 3 months to be honest with me. And I was grateful that he was honest at 3 months. And then through his process, as we went through the process, we kind of developed our own language in our relationship of, well, how can I help you? And one of the things David came up with was you could ask me questions. You could ask me questions like, were you tempted today? How were you tempted today? Did you look at porn today? We also put in, are you okay I'm talking about this?
Yeah, this is great.
We also put in different boundaries for him. David deleted Instagram because if you are struggling sexually, you should not have Instagram on your phone. And you sure as heck shouldn't have Snapchat on your phone. Because all you're doing is looking at cheap, fake sex. That's not going to satisfy, that's not going to fulfill, and is never going to answer any of the questions that you actually have. It is momentary, it is fleeting, and none of that is going to lead you into wholeness and freedom. So David deleted his Instagram app. We did not have Facebook. Haven't had Facebook since 2009. We're actually really proud of that.
We've been Facebook free for 10 years.
Hi, my name's... Hi, I'm David and Leann, and we haven't
no longer
had Facebook
struggle with Facebook.
I'm just kidding. You guys, we had Facebook when you had to have a .edu email address. You weren't...
.edu,
Did
yeah.
you know that? That was a thing. Anyway, okay. So he deleted Instagram, didn't have any social media platforms, and then we also put in protection. I can't think of the wording. Lock, boundaries.
Parental controls.
There it is. Yes.
Restrictions is what they're called, but.
Restrictions! That's the word I was looking for. I'm not David's parent. I did not enter into a parental role. We probably wouldn't still be married if I entered into a parental role, because who wants to be parented by their spouse? Anyone? No. So that's what we did with David's phone to help him, because it was like where he was at in his process and his struggle. He was unearthing crap. And I don't know if you've gone through these things in your life, and when you unearth crap, you just feel like more crap. And it's very easy to fall into the things that cause you to stumble, the things that don't lead you into health, wholeness, and freedom, which is what Jesus offers you. So we did that to help him. David doesn't have those things anymore. David has Instagram on his phone now, and we still check in about it every now and then, because it's not a constant struggle for him anymore, because he dealt with the root of the issue, because there's always a root of the issue. The problem isn't Instagram. The problem is how you use Instagram. The problem isn't Snapchat. The problem is how you use Snapchat. So until you do that work and facing that stuff, that's a harmful tool for you. And then when you can combat that and you can overpower that, you can have that self-control, you can rely on Jesus and the community around you, then maybe you can use Instagram healthfully. Then maybe you can use Snapchat healthfully. That was a long answer, sorry.
I just want to add to the long answer. The biggest piece of the like removing things from my phone wasn't like a I can't trust you, so you can't have these things, Kay. It was what I talked about yesterday in our breakout, like the neural pathways that I had created, the ways that I engaged like practical things to find momentary comfort for all of my hurt. Those things had just become repetitive. So I had this cycle where I would get overwhelmed, or I'd feel alone, I'd feel stressed. And my entrance point was always, oh my gosh, like I have to deal with this alone, because no one ever took care of me when I was younger in that area. So I have to deal with this on my own. Those are the unconscious pathways that my brain had made when I was neglecting my limbic system, the way that I processed emotion. So in doing some of these practical things, we started to set up new rhythms. So I actually couldn't go to the things that comforted me when I was feeling alone, overwhelmed, or stressed. I had to go and say to Leann, hey, I'm feeling overwhelmed. And the amount of shame that I felt for saying I'm overwhelmed was immense. It's crazy. But every time she was like, well, why are you overwhelmed? And there was never any shame. And then when
That's not entirely true. I don't answer nicely all the time.
When I said I was overwhelmed, you normally did. Okay. If I said 98% of the time.
Like, I'm a nice person, okay? And I love David, but I've got my own stuff. So sometimes I think I would answer, and that would perpetuate a potential cycle based on where I was.
For sure. I mean, we are humans. But
just highlighting that your community isn't perfect. I don't know if you know that.
One of the biggest things, though, was that when I would, if I fell or if I was like, I'm so overwhelmed and I looked at porn or whatever happened, and I would sit in that 3-month period of not talking to her about it, the enemy was constantly telling me, don't talk to her, because she's just going to heap shame on you. She's going to make it worse. She's going to make your overwhelm feel even more overwhelming. So I was like, well, yeah, and also I don't want to burden her, and I don't want to be, that guy that's doing this. So I talked myself into it, the enemy talked me into it, and then when I finally was honest, and she didn't shame me, and she didn't heap overwhelm onto my already overwhelmed little heart. It started to shift things. It started to rewrite the way that I saw the things that I was going through. So even to the question of how can I help my gay friends when they're confused, like, don't heap shame. That's not something, like, shame never makes anyone change. Like, public shame, private shame, any sort of shame doesn't help. But compassion, questions, trying to get to know someone, those are great things. There is a middle ground. There's not just shame or acceptance. There's a middle ground. Well, why did you do that? Do you realize that that affects me? Do you realize that affects you? How can we make this different in the future? What do you need? Those are great follow-up questions when someone is having a hard time with how to engage Jesus in hard places.